Matthew Henry Bible Commentary 2 Kings Book of 2 Kings chapter 15. In this chapter, the history of two of the kings of Judah is briefly recorded. 1. Of Azariah or Uzziah, verse 1-7. 2. Of Jotham his son, verse 32-38. 2. The history of many of the kings of Israel that reigned at the same time is given us in short, 5 in succession, all of whom, except one, went down slain to the pit, and their murders were their successors. 1. Zechariah, the last of the house of Jehu, reigned 6 months, and then was slain and succeeded by Shallum, verse 8-12. 2. Shallum reigned 1 month, and then was slain and succeeded by Menahem, verse 13-15. 3. Menahem reigned 10 years, or tyrannized rather. Such were his barbarous cruelties, version 16, and unreasonable exactions, version 20, and then died in his bed, and left his son to succeed him first, and then suffer for him. Verse 16-22. 4. Pekahiah reigned 2 years, and then was slain and succeeded by Pekah, verse 23-26. 5. Pekah reigned 20 years, and then was slain and succeeded by Hoshea, the last of all the kings of Israel, verse 27-31. For things were now working and hastening apace towards the final destruction of that kingdom. The reign of Azariah, 798 BC. 1 in the 27th year of Jeroboam king of Israel began Azariah son of Amaziah king of Judah to reign. 216 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jecholiah of Jerusalem. 3. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done, for save that the high places were not removed. The people sacrificed and burnt incense still on the high places. 5. And the Lord smote the king, so that he was a leper unto the day of his death, and dwelt in a several house. And Jotham the king's son was over the house, judging the people of the land. 6. And the rest of the acts of Azariah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? 7. So Azariah slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Jotham his son reigned in his stead. This is a short account of the reign of Azariah I. Most of it is general, and the same that has been given of others. He began young and reigned long. V2. Did, for the most part, that which was right. V3. It was happy for the kingdom that a good reign was a long one. Only he had not zeal and courage enough to take away the high places. V4. 2. That which is peculiar. V5. That God smote him with a leprosy, is more largely related, with the occasion of it, 2 Chron 26:16, etc., where we have also a fuller account of the glories of the former part of his reign, as well as of the disgraces of the latter part of it. He did that which was right, as Amaziah had done. Like him, he began well, but failed before he finished. Here we are told, 1. That he was a leper. The greatest of men are not only subject to the common calamities, but also to the common infirmities of human nature, and, if they be guilty of any heinous sin, they lie as open as the meanest to the most grievous strokes of divine vengeance. 2. God smote him with this leprosy, to chastise him for his presumptuous invasion of the priest's office. If great men be proud men, some way or other God will humble them, and make them know he is both above them and against them, for he resisteth the proud. 3. That he was a leper to the day of his death. Though we have reason to think he repented, and the sin was pardoned, yet, for warning to others, he was continued under this mark of God's displeasure as long as he lived, and perhaps it was for the good of his soul that he was so. 4. That he dwelt in a separate house, as being made ceremonially unclean by the law, to the discipline of which, though a king, he must submit. He that presumptuously intruded into God's temple, and pretended to be a priest, was justly shut out from his own palace, and shut up as a prisoner or recluse, ever after. We suppose that his separate house was made as convenient and agreeable as might be. Some translated a free house, where he had liberty to take his pleasure. However, it was a great mortification to one that had been so much a man of honor, and a man of business as he had been, to be cut off from society and dwell always in a separate house. It would almost make life itself a burden, even to kings. Though they have never any to converse with but their inferiors, the most contemplative men would soon be weary of it. 5. That his son was his viceroy in the affairs both of his court, for he was over the house, and of his kingdom, for he was judging the people of the land. And it was both a comfort to him and a blessing to his kingdom that he had such a son to fill up his room. The reigns of Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, Pekah, and Hosea, 758 BC. 8 in the 38th year of Azariah king of Judah did Zechariah the son of Jeroboam reign over Israel in Samaria 6 months. 9 And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. 10 And Shallum the son of Jabesh conspired against him, and smote him before the people, and slew him, and reigned in his stead. 11 And the rest of the acts of Zechariah, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. This was the word of the Lord which he spake unto Jehu, saying, Thy sons shall sit on the throne of Israel unto the 4th generation. And so it came to pass. 13 Shallum the son of Jabesh began to reign in the 39th year of Uzziah king of Judah, and he reigned a full month in Samaria. 14 For Menahem the son of Gadi went up from Tirzah, and came to Samaria, and smote Shallum the son of Jabesh in Samaria, and slew him, and reigned in his stead. 15 And the rest of the acts of Shallum, and his conspiracy which he made, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. 16 Then Menahem smote Tiphsah, and all that were therein, and the coasts thereof from Tirzah, because they opened not to him, therefore he smote it, and all the women therein that were with child he ripped up. 17 In the 39th year of Azariah king of Judah began Menahem the son of Gadi to reign over Israel, and reigned 10 years in Samaria. 18 And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not all his days from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. 19 And Pul the king of Assyria came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to confirm the kingdom in his hand. 20 And Menahem exacted the money of Israel, even of all the mighty men of wealth, of each man 50 shekels of silver, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back, and stayed not there in the land. 21 And the rest of the acts of Menahem, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? 22 And Menahem slept with his fathers, and Pekahiah his son reigned in his stead. 23 In the 50th year of Azariah king of Judah, Pekahiah the son of Menahem began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 2 years. 24 And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. 25 But Pekah the son of Remaliah, a captain of his, conspired against him, and smote him in Samaria, in the palace of the king's house, with Argob and Ariah, and with him 50 men of the Gileadites, and he killed him, and reigned in his room. 26 And the rest of the acts of Pekahiah, and all that he did, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. 27 In the 52nd year of Azariah king of Judah, Pekah the son of Remaliah began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 20 years. 28 And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. 29 In the days of Pekah king of Israel came Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria, and took Ijon, and Abel-Beth-Maachah, and Genoa, and Kadesh, and Hazor, and Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria. 30 And Hosea the son of Elah made a conspiracy against Pekah the son of Remaliah, and smote him, and slew him, and reigned in his stead, in the 20th year of Jotham the son of Uzziah. 31 And the rest of the acts of Pekah, and all that he did, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. The best days of the kingdom of Israel were while the government was in Jehu's family. In his reign, and the next 3 reigns, Though there were many abominable corruptions and miserable grievances in Israel, yet the crown went in succession, the kings died in their beds, and some care was taken of public affairs. But now that those days are at an end, the history which we have in these verses of about 33 years represents the affairs of that kingdom in the utmost confusion imaginable. Woe to those that were with child, v. 16, and to those that gave suck in those days, for then must needs be great tribulations, when, for the transgression of the land, many were the princes thereof. Aye, let us observe something in general concerning these unhappy revolutions and the calamities which must needs attend them, these bad times, as they may truly be called. 1. God had tried the people of Israel both with judgments and mercies, explained and enforced by his servants the prophets, and yet they continued impenitent and unreformed, and therefore God justly brought these miseries upon them, as Moses had warned them. If you will yet walk contrary to me, I will punish you yet 7 times more. Lev 26:21, etc. 2. God made good his promise to Jehu, that his sons to the 4th generation after him should sit upon the throne of Israel, which was a greater favor than was shown to any of the royal families either before or after his. God had said it should be so, Ch 10:30, and we are told in this chapter, v. 12, that so it came to pass. See how punctual God is to his promises. These calamities God long designed for Israel, and they deserved them, yet they were not inflicted till that word had taken effect to the full. Thus God rewarded Jehu for his zeal in destroying the worship of Baal and the house of Ahab, and yet, when the measure of the sins of the house of Jehu was full, God avenged upon it the blood then shed, called the blood of Jezreel, Hos 1:4. 3. All these kings did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, for they walked in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Though at variance with one another, yet in this they agreed, to keep up idolatry, and the people loved to have it so. Though they were emptied from vessel to vessel, that taste remained in them, and that scent was not changed. It was sad indeed when their government was so often altered, yet never for the better, that among all those contending interests none of them should think it as much their interest to destroy the calves as others had done to support them. 4. Each of these, except one, conspired against his predecessor, and slew him, Shallum, Menahem, Pekah, and Hoshe, all traitors and murderers, and yet all kings a while, one of them 10, another 20, and another 9 years. For God may suffer wickedness to prosper and to carry away the wealth and honors a while, but, sooner or later, blood shall have blood, and he that dealt treacherously shall be dealt treacherously with. One wicked man is often made a scourge to another, and every wicked man, at length, a ruin to himself. 5. The ambition of the great men made the nation miserable. Here is Tifsa, a city of Israel, barbarously destroyed, with all the coasts thereof, by one of these pretenders, v. 16, and no doubt it was through blood that each of them waded to the throne, nor could any of these kings perish alone. No land can have greater pests, nor Israel worse troubles, than such men as care not how much the welfare and repose of their country are sacrificed to their revenge and affectation of dominion. 6. While the nation was thus shattered by divisions at home, the kings of Assyria, first one, v. 19, and then another, v. 29, came against it and did what they pleased. Nothing does more towards the making of a nation an easy prey to a common enemy than intestine broils and contests for the sovereignty. Happy the land where that is settled. 7. This was the condition of Israel just before they were quite ruined and carried away captive, for that was in the 9th year of Hoshe, the last of these usurpers. If they had, in these days of confusion and perplexity, humbled themselves before God and sought his face, that final destruction might have been prevented, but when God judgeth, he will overcome. These factions, the fruit of an evil spirit sent among them, hastened that captivity, for a kingdom thus divided against itself will soon come to desolation. 2. Let us take a short view of the particular reigns. 1. Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign in the 38th year of Azariah or Uzziah, king of Judah, v. 8. Some of the most critical chronologers reckon that between Jeroboam and his son Zechariah the throne was vacant 22 years, others 11 years. through the disturbances and dissensions that were in the kingdom. And then it was not strange that Zechariah was deposed before he was well seated on the throne. He reigned but 6 months, and then Shallum slew him before the people, perhaps as Caesar was slain in the Senate, or he put him to death publicly as a criminal, with the approbation of the people, to whom he had, some way or other, made himself odious. So ended the line of Jehu. 2. But had Shallum peace, who slew his master? No, he had not. V. 13. 1 month of days measured his reign, and then he was cut off. Perhaps to this the prophet, who then lived, refers, Hos 5:7. Now shall a month devour them with their portions. That dominion seldom lasts long which is founded in blood and falsehood. Menahem, either provoked by his crime or animated by his example, soon served him as he had served his master, slew him and reigned in his stead. V. 14. Probably he was general in the army, which then lay encamped at Tirzah, and, hearing of Shallum's treason and usurpation, hastened to punish it, as Omri did that of Zimri in a like case. 1 Kings 16:17. 3. Menahem held the kingdom 10 years. V. 17. But whereas we have heard that the kings of the house of Israel were merciful kings, 1 Kings 20:31, this Menahem, the scandal of his country, was so prodigiously cruel to those of his own nation who hesitated a little at submitting to him that he not only ruined a city and the coasts thereof, but, forgetting that he himself was born of a woman, ripped up all the women with child. V. 16. We may well wonder that ever it should enter into the heart of any man to be so barbarous and to be so perfectly lost to humanity itself. By these cruel methods he hoped to strengthen himself and to frighten all others into his interests, but it seems he did not gain his point, for when the king of Assyria came against him, 1. So little confidence had he in his people that he durst not meet him as an enemy, but was obliged, at a vast expense, to purchase a peace with him. 2. Such need had he of help to confirm the kingdom in his hand that he made it part of his bargain with him, a bargain which, no doubt, the king of Assyria knew how to make a good hand of another time, that he should assist him against his own subjects that were disaffected to him. The money wherewith he purchased his friendship was a vast sum, no less than 1,000 talents of silver, v. 19, which Menahem exacted, it is probable, by military execution, of all the mighty men of wealth, very considerately sparing the poor, and laying the burden, as was fit, on those that were best able to bear it. Being raised, it was given to the king of Assyria, as pay for his army, 50 shekels of silver for each man in it. Thus he got clear of the king of Assyria for this time. He stayed not to quarter in the land. V. 20. But his army now got so rich a booty with so little trouble that it encouraged them to come again, not long after, when they laid all waste. Thus was he the betrayer of his country that should have been the protector of it. 4. Pekahiah, the son of Menahem, succeeded his father, but reigned only 2 years, and then was treacherously slain by Pekah, falling under the load both of his own and of his father's wickedness. It is repeated concerning him as before that he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam. Still this is mentioned, to show that God was righteous in bringing that destruction upon them which came not long after, because they hated to be reformed. V. 24. Pekah, it seems, had some persons of figure in his interest, 2 of whom are here named. V. 25, and with their help he compassed his design. 5. Pekah, though he got the kingdom by treason, kept it 20 years. V. 27. So long it was before his violent dealing returned upon his own head, but it returned at last. This Pekah, son of Remaliah, 1. Made himself more considerable abroad than any of these usurpers, for he was, even in the latter end of his time, in the reign of Ahaz, which began in his 17th year, a great terror to the kingdom of Judah, as we find, Isa 7:1, etc. 2. He lost a great part of his kingdom to the king of Assyria. Several cities are here named, v. 29, which were taken from him, all the land of Gilead on the other side Jordan, and Galilee in the north containing the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun were seized, and the inhabitants carried captive into Assyria. By this judgment, God punished him for his attempt upon Judah and Jerusalem. It was then foretold that within 2 or 3 years after he made that attempt, before a child, then born, should be able to cry, "My father and my mother," the riches of Samaria should be taken away before the king of Assyria, Isa 8:4. And here we have the accomplishment of that prediction. 3. Soon after this he forfeited his life to the resentments of his countrymen, who, it is probable, were disgusted at him for leaving them exposed to a foreign enemy while he was invading Judah, of which he took advantage and, to gain his crown, seized his life, slew him, and reigned in his stead. Surely he was fond of a crown indeed who, at this time, would run such a hazard as a traitor did, for the crown of Israel, now that it had lost the choicest of its flowers and jewels, was lined more than ever with thorns, had of late been fatal to all the heads that had worn it, was forfeited to divine justice, and now ready to be laid in the dust, a crown which a wise man would not have taken up in the street, yet he not only ventured upon it, but ventured for it. And it cost him dear. The reign of Jotham, 742 BC. 32 in the second year of Pekah the son of Remaliah king of Israel began Jotham the son of Uzziah king of Judah to reign. 33, 5, and 20 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. 34, and he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. He did according to all that his father Uzziah had done. 35, howbeit the high places were not removed. The people sacrificed and burned incense still in the high places. He built the higher gate of the house of the Lord. 36, now the rest of the acts of Jotham, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? 37, in those days the Lord began to send against Judah Rezin the king of Syria, and Pekah the son of Remaliah. 38, and Jotham slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father, and as his son reigned in his stead. We have here a short account of the reign of Jotham king of Judah, of whom we are told, 1. That he reigned very well, did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. V. 34. Josephus gives him a very high character, stating that he was pious towards God, just towards men, and laid out himself for the public good, that, whatever was amiss, he took care to have it rectified, and, in short, wanted no virtue that became a good prince. Though the high places were not taken away, yet to draw people from them, and keep them close to God's holy place, he showed great respect to the temple, and built the higher gate which he went through to the temple. If magistrates cannot do all they would for the suppressing of vice and profaneness, let them do so much the more for the support and advancement of piety and virtue, and the bringing of them into reputation. If they cannot pull down the high places of sin, yet let them build and beautify the high gate of God's house. 2. That he died in the midst of his days. V. 33. Of most of the kings of Judah we are told how old they were when they began their reign, and by that may compute how old they were when they died. But no account is kept of the age of any of the kings of Israel that I remember, only of the years of their reigns. This honor God would put upon the kings of the house of David above those of other families. And by these accounts it appears that there was none of all the kings of Judah that reached David's age, 70, the common age of man. Asa's age I do not find. Uzziah lived to be 68, Manasseh 67, and Jehoshaphat 60, and these were the 3 oldest. Many of those that were of note did not reach 50. This Jotham died at 41. He was too great a blessing to be continued long to such an unworthy people. His death was a judgment, especially considering the character of his son and successor. 3. That in his days the confederacy was formed against Judah by Rezin and Remaliah's son, the king of Syria and the king of Israel, which appeared so very formidable in the beginning of the reign of Ahaz that, upon notice of it, the heart of that prince was moved, and the heart of the people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Isa 7:2. The Confederates were unjust in the attempt, yet it is here said, v. 37, the Lord began to send them against Judah, as he bade Shimei curse David, and took away from Job what the Sabaeans robbed him of. Men are God's hand, the sword, the rod in his hand, which he makes use of as he pleases to serve his own righteous counsels, though men be unrighteous in their intentions. This storm gathered in the reign of pious Jotham, but he came to his grave in peace, and it fell upon his degenerate son. Chapter 16. This chapter is wholly taken up with the reign of Ahaz, and we have quite enough of it, unless it were better. He had a good father, and a better son, and yet was himself one of the worst of the kings of Judah. He was a notorious idolater. Ver 1-4. 2. With the treasures of the temple, as well as his own, he hired the king of Assyria to invade Syria and Israel. Ver 5-9. 3. He took pattern from an idol's altar which he saw at Damascus for a new altar in God's temple. Ver 10-16. 4. He abused and embezzled the furniture of the temple. Version 17:18. And so his story ends. Version 19:20. The reign of Ahaz, 726 BC. One in the 17th year of Pekah the son of Remaliah, Ahaz the son of Jotham king of Judah began to reign. 220 years old was Ahaz when he began to reign, and reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and did not that which was right in the sight of the Lord his God, like David his father. 3. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, and made his son to pass through the fire, according to the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel. 4. And he sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places, and on the hills, and under every green tree. We have here a general character of the reign of Ahaz. Few and evil were his days, few. For he died at 36, evil, for we are here told. 1. That he did not that which was right like David. V2. That is, he had none of that concern and affection for the instituted service and worship of God for which David was celebrated. He had no love for the temple, made no conscience of his duty to God, nor had any regard to his law. Herein he was unlike David. It was his honor that he was of the house and lineage of David, and it was owing to God's ancient covenant with David that he was now upon the throne, which aggravated his wickedness. For he was a reproach to that honorable name and family, which therefore was really a reproach to him, degeneranti genus opprobrium. A good extraction is a disgrace to him who degenerates from it. And though he enjoyed the benefit of David's piety, he did not tread in the steps of it. 2. That he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. V3. Who all worshipped the calves. He was not joined in any affinity with them, as Jehoram and Ahaziah were with the house of Ahab, but ex mero motu, without any instigation, walked in their way. The kings of Israel pleaded policy and reasons of state for their idolatry, but Ahaz had no such pretense. In him it was the most unreasonable and politic thing that could be. They were his enemies, and had proved enemies to themselves too by their idolatry, yet he walked in their way. 3. That he made his sons to pass through the fire, to the honor of his dunghill deities. He burnt them, so it is expressly said of him, 2 Chron 28:3, burnt some of them, and perhaps made others of them, Hezekiah himself not excepted, though afterwards he was never the worse for it, to pass between 2 fires, or to be drawn through a flame, in token of their dedication to the idol. 4. That he did according to the abominations of the heathen whom the Lord had cast out. It was an instance of his great folly that he would be guided in his religion by those whom he saw fallen into the ditch before his eyes, and follow them. And it was an instance of his great impiety that he would conform to those usages which God had declared to be abominable to him, and set himself to write after the copy of those whom God had cast out, thus walking directly contrary to God. 5. That he sacrificed in the high places. V4. If his father had but had zeal enough to take them away, the debauching of his sons might have been prevented, but those that connive at sin know not what dangerous snares they lay for those that come after them. He forsook God's house, was weary of that place where, in his father's time, he had often been detained before the Lord, and performed his devotions on high hills, where he had a better prospect, and under green trees, where he had a more pleasant shade. It was a religion little worth, which was guided by fancy, not by faith. 5. Then Rezin king of Syria and Pekah son of Remaliah king of Israel came up to Jerusalem to war, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. 6. At that time Rezin king of Syria recovered Elath to Syria, and drave the Jews from Elath, and the Syrians came to Elath, and dwelt there unto this day. 7. So has sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me. 8. And Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house, and sent it for a present to the king of Assyria. 9. And the king of Assyria hearkened unto him, for the king of Assyria went up against Damascus, and took it, and carried the people of it captive to Kir, and slew Rezin. Here is 1. The attempt of his confederate neighbors, the kings of Syria and Israel, upon him. They thought to make themselves masters of Jerusalem, and to set a king of their own in it. Isa 7:6. In this they fell short, but the king of Syria recovered Elath, a considerable port upon the Red Sea, which Amaziah had taken from the Syrians. Ch 14:22. What can those keep that have lost their religion? Let them expect, thenceforward, to be always on the losing hand. 2. His project to get clear of them. Having forsaken God, he had neither courage nor strength to make head against his enemies, nor could he, with any boldness, ask help of God. But he made his court to the king of Assyria, and got him to come in for his relief. Those whose hearts condemn them will go anywhere in a day of distress rather than to God. Was it because there was not a God in Israel that he sent to the Assyrian for help? Was the rock of ages removed out of its place, that he stayed himself on this broken reed? The sin itself was its own punishment. For, though it is true that he gained his point, the king of Assyria hearkened to him, and, to serve his own turn, made a descent upon Damascus, whereby he gave a powerful diversion to the king of Syria. 9. And obliged him to let fall his design against Ahaz, carrying the Syrians captive to Kir, as Amos had expressly foretold. Ch 1:5. Yet, considering all, he made but a bad bargain. For, to compass this, 1. He enslaved himself. 7. I am thy servant and thy son, that is, I will be as dutiful and obedient to thee as to a master or father, if thou wilt but do me this good turn. Had he thus humbled himself to God, and implored his favor, he might have been delivered upon easier terms. He might have saved his money, and needed only to have parted with his sins. But if the prodigal forsake his father's house, he soon becomes a slave to the worst of masters. Luke 15:15. 2. He impoverished himself, for he took the silver and gold that were laid up in the treasury both of the temple and of the kingdom, and sent it to the king of Assyria. 8. Both church and state must be squeezed and exhausted to gratify this his new patron and guardian. I know not what authority he had thus to dispose of the public stock, but it is common for those that have brought themselves into straits by one sin to help themselves out by another. And those that have alienated themselves from God will make no difficulty of alienating any of his rights. 10. And King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria, and saw an altar that was at Damascus. And King Ahaz sent to Uriah the priest the fashion of the altar, and the pattern of it, according to all the workmanship thereof. 11. And Uriah the priest built an altar according to all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus. So Uriah the priest made it against King Ahaz came from Damascus. 12. And when the king was come from Damascus, the king saw the altar, and the king approached to the altar, and offered thereon. 13. And he burnt his burnt offering and his meat offering, and poured his drink offering, and sprinkled the blood of his peace offerings upon the altar. 14. And he brought also the brasen altar, which was before the Lord, from the forefront of the house, from between the altar and the house of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the altar. 15. And King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, saying, Upon the great altar burn the morning burnt offering, and the evening meat offering, and the king's burnt sacrifice, and his meat offering, with the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their meat offering, and their drink offerings, and sprinkle upon it all the blood of the burnt offering, and all the blood of the sacrifice, and the brasen altar shall be for me to inquire by. 16. Thus did Uriah the priest, according to all that King Ahaz commanded. Though Ahaz had himself sacrificed in high places, on hills, and under every green tree. 4. Yet God's altar had hitherto continued in its place and in use, and the king's burnt offering and his meat offering. V. 15 had been offered upon it by the priests that attended it, but here we have it taken away by wicked Ahaz, and another altar, an idolatrous one, put in the room of it, a bolder stroke than the worst of the kings had yet given to religion. We have here the model of this new altar, taken from one at Damascus by the king himself, v. 10. The king of Assyria having taken Damascus, thither Ahaz went, to congratulate him on his success, to return him thanks for the kindness he had done him by this expedition, and, as his servant and son, to receive his commands. Had he been faithful to his God, he would not have needed to crouch thus meanly to a foreign power. At Damascus, either while viewing the rarities of the place, or rather while joining with them in their devotions, for, when he was there, he thought it no harm to do as they did, he saw an altar that pleased his fancy extremely. Not such a plain, old-fashioned one as that which he had been trained up in attendance upon at Jerusalem, but curiously carved, it is likely, and adorned with image work. There were many pretty things about it which he thought significant, surprising, very charming, and calculated to excite his devotion. Solomon had but a dull fancy, he thought, compared with the ingenious artist that made this altar. Nothing will serve him, but he must have an altar just like this. A pattern of it must be taken immediately. He cannot stay till he returns himself, but sends it before him in all haste, with orders to Uriah the priest to get one made exactly according to this model and have it ready against he came home. The pattern God showed to Moses in the mount or to David by the Spirit was not comparable to this pattern sent from Damascus. The hearts of idolaters walked after their eyes, which are therefore said to go a-whoring after their idols, but the true worshippers worship the true God by faith. 2. The making of it by Uriah the priest, v. 11. This Uriah, it is likely, was the chief priest who at this time presided in the temple service. To him has sent an intimation of his mind, for we read not of any express orders he gave him to get an altar made by this pattern. And, without any dispute or objection, he put it in hand immediately, being perhaps as fond of it as the king was, at least being very willing to humor the king and desirous to curry favor with him. Perhaps he might have this excuse for gratifying the king herein, that, by this means, he might keep him to the temple at Jerusalem and prevent his totally deserting it for the high places and the groves. Let us oblige him in this, thinks Uriah, and then he will bring all his sacrifices to us, for by this craft we get our living. But whatever pretense he had, it was a most base wicked thing for him that was a priest, a chief priest, to make this altar, in compliance with an idolatrous prince, for hereby, 1. He prostituted his authority and profaned the crown of his priesthood, making himself a servant to the lusts of men. There is not a greater disgrace to the ministry than obsequiousness to such wicked commands as this was. 2. He betrayed his trust. As priest, he was bound to maintain and defend God's institutions, and to oppose and witness against all innovations, and for him to assist and serve the king in setting up an altar to confront the altar which by divine appointment he was consecrated to minister at, was such a piece of treachery and perfidiousness as may justly render him infamous to all posterity. Had he only connived at the doing of it, had he been frightened into it by menaces, had he endeavored to dissuade the king from it, or but delayed the doing of it till he came home, that he might first talk with him about it, it would not have been so bad. But so willingly to walk after his commandment, as if he were glad of the opportunity to oblige him, was such an affront to the God he served as was utterly inexcusable. 3. The dedicating of it. Uriah, perceiving that the king's heart was much upon it, took care to have it ready against he came down, and set it near the brazen altar, but somewhat lower and further from the door of the temple. The king was exceedingly pleased with it, approached it with all possible veneration, and offered thereon his burnt offering, etc. v. 12:13. His sacrifices were not offered to the God of Israel, but to the gods of Damascus, as we find 2 Chron 28:23, and when he borrowed the Syrians' altar, no marvel that he borrowed their gods. Naaman, the Syrian, embraced the God of Israel when he got earth from the land of Israel to make an altar of. 4. The removal of God's altar to make room for it. Uriah was so modest that he put this altar at the lower end of the court and left God's altar in its place, between this and the house of the Lord. V 14. But that would not satisfy Ahaz. He removed God's altar to an obscure corner in the north side of the court and put his own before the sanctuary, in the place of it. He thinks his new altar is much more stately and much more sightly, and disgraces that, and therefore let that be laid aside as a vessel in which there is no pleasure. His superstitious invention, at first, jostled with God's sacred institution, but at length jostled it out. Note, those will soon come to make nothing of God that will not be content to make him their all. Ahaz durst not, perhaps for fear of the people, quite demolish the brazen altar and knock it to pieces, but while he ordered all the sacrifices to be offered upon this new altar, v 15, the brazen altar, says he, shall be for me to inquire by. Having thrust it out from the use for which it was instituted, which was to sanctify the gifts offered upon it, he pretends to advance it above its institution, which it is common for superstitious people to do. The altar was never designed for an oracle, yet Ahaz will have it for that use. The Romish Church seemingly magnifies Christ's sacraments, yet wretchedly corrupts them. But some give another sense of Ahaz's purpose. As for the brazen altar, I will consider what to do with it and give order about it. The Jews say that, afterwards, of the brass of it he made that famous dial which was called the dial of Ahaz, ch. 2011. The base compliance of the poor-spirited priest with the presumptuous usurpations of an ill-spirited king is again taken notice of. v. 16 Uriah the priest did according to all that King Ahaz commanded. Miserable is the case of great men, when those that should reprove them for their sins strengthen and serve them in their sins. 17 And King Ahaz cut off the borders of the bases, and removed the laver from off them, and took down the sea from off the brazen oxen that were under it, and put it upon a pavement of stones. 18 And the covert for the Sabbath that they had built in the house, and the king's entry without, turned he from the house of the Lord for the king of Assyria. 19 Now the rest of the acts of Ahaz which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? 20 And Ahaz slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and Hezekiah his son reigned in his stead. Here is Ahaz abusing the temple, not the building itself, but some of the furniture of it. 1. He defaced the bases on which the lavers were set, 1 Kings 7:28, 29, and took down the molten sea, v. 17. These the priests used for washing. Against them, therefore, he seems to have had a particular spite. It is one of the greatest prejudices that can be done to religion to obstruct the purifying of the priests, the Lord's ministers. 2. He removed the covert for the Sabbath, erected either in honor of the Sabbath or for the conveniency of the priests, when, on the Sabbath, they officiated in greater numbers than on other days. Whatever it was, it should seem that in removing it he intended to put a contempt upon the Sabbath, and so to open as wide an inlet as any to all manner of impiety. 3. The king's entry, which led to the house of the Lord, for the convenience of the royal family, perhaps that ascent which Solomon had made, and which the Queen of Sheba admired, 1 Kings 10:5, he turned another way, to show that he did not intend to frequent the house of the Lord any more. This he did for the king of Assyria, to oblige him, who perhaps returned his visit, and found fault with this entry, as an inconvenience and disparagement to his palace. When those that have had a ready passage to the house of the Lord, to please their neighbors, turn it another way, they are going down the hill apace towards their ruin. 2. Ahaz resigning his life in the midst of his days, at 36 years of age, v. 19, and leaving his kingdom to a better man, Hezekiah his son, v. 20, who proved as much a friend to the temple as he had been an enemy to it. Perhaps this very son he had made to pass through the fire, and thereby dedicated him to Moloch, but God, by his grace, snatched him as a brand out of the burning. Chapter 17 This chapter gives us an account of the captivity of the 10 tribes, and so finishes the history of that kingdom, after it had continued about 265 years, from the setting up of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. In it we have a short narrative of this destruction, ver 1-6. 2. Remarks upon it, and the causes of it, for the justifying of God in it and for warning to others. Verse 7 to 23. 3. An account of the nations which succeeded them in the possession of their land, and the mongrel religions set up among them. Verse 24 to 41. Samaria besieged by the Assyrians, Israel subdued by Assyria, 730 BC. 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz king of Judah began Hoshea the son of Elah to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. 2. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. 3. Against him came up Shalmaneser king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant, and gave him presents. 4. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up, and bound him in prison. 5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it 3 years. 6. In the 9th year of Hoshea the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Hala and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. We have here the reign and ruin of Hoshea, the last of the kings of Israel, concerning whom observe, that, though he forced his way to the crown by treason and murder, as we read ch. 1530, yet he gained not the possession of it till 7 or 8 years after, for it was in the 4th year of Ahaz that he slew Pekah, but did not himself begin to reign till the 12th year of Ahaz, v. 1. Whether by the king of Assyria, or by the king of Judah, or by some of his own people, does not appear, but it seems so long he was kept out of the throne he aimed at. Justly were his bad practices thus chastised, and the word of the prophet was thus fulfilled. Hos 10:3. Now they shall say we have no king, because we feared not the Lord. 2. That, though he was bad, yet not so bad as the kings of Israel had been before him. v. 2. Not so devoted to the calves as they had been. One of them, that at Dan, the Jews say, had been, before this, carried away by the king of Assyria in the expedition recorded ch. 1529, to which perhaps the prophet refers, Hos 8:5. Thy calf, O Samaria, has cast thee off, which made him put the less confidence in the other. And some say that this Hoshea took off the embargo which the former kings had put their subjects under, forbidding them to go up to Jerusalem to worship, which he permitted those to do that had a mind to it. But what shall we think of this dispensation of providence, that the destruction of the kingdom of Israel should come in the reign of one of the best of its kings? Thy judgments, O God, are a great deep. God would hereby show that in bringing this ruin upon them he designed to punish, 1. Not only the sins of that generation, but of the foregoing ages, and to reckon for the iniquities of their fathers, who had been long in filing the measure, and treasuring up wrath against this day of wrath. 2. Not only the sins of their kings, but the sins of the people. If Hoshea was not so bad as the former kings, yet the people were as bad as those that went before them, and it was an aggravation of their badness, and brought ruin the sooner, that their king did not set them so bad an example as the former kings had done, nor hinder them from reforming. He gave them leave to do better, but they did as bad as ever, which laid the blame of their sin and ruin wholly upon themselves. 3. That the destruction came gradually. They were for some time made tributaries before they were made captives to the king of Assyria, v. 3, and if that less judgment had prevailed to humble and reform them, the greater would have been prevented. 4. That they brought it upon themselves by the indirect course they took to shake off the yoke of the king of Assyria, v. 4. Had the king and people of Israel applied to God, made their peace with him and their prayers to him, they might have recovered their liberty, ease, and honor, but they withheld their tribute and trusted to the king of Egypt to assist them in their revolt, which, if it had taken effect, would have been but to change their oppressors. But Egypt became to them the staff of a broken reed. This provoked the king of Assyria to proceed against them with the more severity. Men get nothing by struggling with the net, but entangle themselves the more. v. That it was an utter destruction that came upon them. 1. The king of Israel was made a prisoner. He was shut up and bound, being, it is probable, taken by surprise before Samaria was besieged. 2. The land of Israel was made a prey. The army of the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, made themselves master of it, v. 5, and treated the people as traitors to be punished with the sword of justice rather than as fair enemies. 3. The royal city of Israel was besieged and at length taken. 3 years it held out after the country was conquered, and no doubt a great deal of misery was endured at that time, which is not particularly recorded, but the brevity of the story and the passing of this matter over lightly, methinks, intimate that they were abandoned of God, and he did not now regard the affliction of Israel, as sometimes as he had done. 4. The people of Israel were carried captives into Assyria, v. 6. The generality of the people, those that were of any note, were forced away into the conqueror's country, to be slaves and beggars there. 1. Thus he was pleased to exercise a dominion over them, and to show that they were entirely at his disposal. 2. By depriving them of their possessions and estates, real and personal, and exposing them to all the hardships and reproaches of a removal to a strange country under the power of an imperious army, he chastised them for their rebellion and their endeavor to shake off his yoke. 3. Thus he effectually prevented all such attempts for the future and secured their country to himself. 4. Thus he got the benefit of their service in his own country, as Pharaoh did that of their fathers, and so this unworthy people were lost as they were found, and ended as they began, in servitude and under oppression. 5. Thus he made room for those of his own country that had little, and little to do, at home, to settle in a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. In all these several ways he served himself by this captivity of the 10 tribes. We are here told in what places of his kingdom he disposed of them, in Hala and Habor, in places, we may suppose, far distant from each other, lest they should keep up a correspondence, incorporate again, and become formidable. There, we have reason to think, after some time they were so mingled with the nations that they were lost, and the name of Israel was no more in remembrance. Those that forgot God were themselves forgotten. Those that studied to be like the nations were buried among them, and those that would not serve God in their own land were made to serve their enemies in a strange land. It is probable that they were the men of honor and estates who were carried captive, and that many of the meaner sort of people were left behind, many of every tribe, who either went over to Judah or became subject to the Assyrian colonies, and their posterity were Galileans or Samaritans. But thus ended Israel as a nation. Now they became Lo-Ami, not a people, and Lo-Ruhamah, unpitied. Now Canaan spurred them out. When we read of their entry under Hoshea the son of Nun, who would have thought that such as this should be their exit under Hoshea the son of Elah? Thus Rome's glory in Augusta sunk, many ages after, in Augustulus. Providence so ordered the eclipsing of the honor of the 10 tribes that the honor of Judah, the royal tribe, and Levi, the holy tribe, which yet remained, might shine the brighter. Yet we find a number sealed of every one of the 12 tribes, Rev 7, except Dan. James writes to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, Jam 1:1, and Paul speaks of the 12 tribes which instantly served God day and night, Acts 26:7, so that though we never read of those that were carried captive, nor have any reason to credit the conjecture of some, that they yet remain a distinct body in some remote corner of the world, yet a remnant of them did escape, to keep up the name of Israel, till it came to be worn by the gospel church, the spiritual Israel, in which it will ever remain. Gal 6:16. The wickedness of Israel, 730 BC. 7 For so it was, that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, 8 And walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. 9 And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord their God, and they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. 10 And they set them up images and groves in every high hill, and under every green tree. 11 And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen whom the Lord carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord to anger. 12 For they served idols, whereof the Lord had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. 13 Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. 14 Notwithstanding they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers, that did not believe in the Lord their God. 15 And they rejected his statutes, and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them, and they followed vanity, and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them, that they should not do like them. 16 And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. 17 And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. 18 Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight. There was none left, but the tribe of Judah only. 19 Also Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. 20 And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel, and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of spoilers, until he had cast them out of his sight. 21 For he rent Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king, and Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord, and made them sin a great sin. 22 For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam which he did. They departed not from them. 23 Until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. Though the destruction of the kingdom of the 10 tribes was but briefly related, it is in these verses largely commented upon by our historian, and the reasons of it assigned, not taken from the second causes, the weakness of Israel. Their impolitic management, and the strength and growing greatness of the Assyrian monarch, these things are overlooked, but only from the first cause. Observe 1. It was the Lord that removed Israel out of his sight, whoever were the instruments. He was the author of this calamity. It was destruction from the Almighty. The Assyrian was but the rod of his anger, Isa 10:5. It was the Lord that rejected the seed of Israel, else their enemies could not have seized upon them, v. 20. Who gave Jacob for a spoil and Israel to the robbers? Did not the Lord? Isa 43:24. We lose the benefit of national judgments if we do not eye the hand of God in them, and the fulfilling of the scripture, for that also is taken notice of here, v. 23. The Lord removed Israel out of his favor, and out of their own land, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. Rather shall heaven and earth pass than one tittle of God's word fall to the ground. When God's word and his works are compared, it will be found not only that they agree, but that they illustrate each other. But why would God ruin a people that were raised and incorporated, as Israel was, by miracles and oracles? Why would he undo that which he himself had done at so vast an expense? Was it purely an act of sovereignty? No, it was an act of necessary justice. For 2, they provoked him to do this by their wickedness. Was it God's doing? Nay, it was their own. By their way and their doings they procured all this to themselves, and it was their own wickedness that did correct them. This the sacred historian shows here at large, that it might appear that God did them no wrong, and that others might hear and fear. Come and see what it was that did all this mischief, that broke their power and laid their honor in the dust. It was sin, that, and nothing else, separated between them and God. This is here very movingly laid open as the cause of all the desolations of Israel. He here shows, what God had done for Israel to engage them to serve him. 1. He gave them their liberty, v. 7. He brought them from under the hand of Pharaoh who oppressed them, asserted their freedom, Israel is my son, and effected their freedom with a high hand. Thus they were bound in duty and gratitude to be his servants, for he had loosed their bonds. Nor would he that rescued them out of the hand of the king of Egypt have contradicted himself so far as to deliver them into the hand of the king of Assyria, as he did, if they had not, by their iniquity, betrayed their liberty, and sold themselves. 2. He gave them their law and was himself their king. They were immediately under a divine regimen. They could not plead ignorance of good and evil, sin and duty, for God had particularly charged them against those very things which here he charges them with. V. 15. That they should not do like the heathen. Nor could they be in any doubt concerning their obligation to observe the laws which they are here charged with rejecting, for they were the commandments and statutes of the Lord their God. V. 13. So that no room was left to dispute whether they should keep them or no. He had not dealt so with other nations. PS 147:19-20. 3. He gave them their land, for he cast out the heathen from before them. V. 8. To make room for them, and the casting out of them for their idolatries was as fair a warning as could be given to Israel not to do like them. 2. What they had done against God, notwithstanding these engagements which he had laid upon them. 1. In general, they sinned against the Lord their God. V. 7. They did those things that were not right. V. 9. But secretly. So wedded were they to their evil practices that when they could not do them publicly, could not for shame or could not for fear, they would do them secretly, an evidence of their atheism, that they thought what was done in secret was from under the eye of God himself and would not be required. Again, they wrought wicked things in such a direct contradiction to the divine law that they seemed as if they were done on purpose to provoke the Lord to anger. V. 11. In contempt of his authority and defiance of his justice. They rejected God's statutes and his covenant. V. 15. Would not be bound up either by his command or the consent they themselves had given to the covenant, but threw off the obligations of both, and therefore God justly rejected them. V. 20. See Hos 4:6. They left all the commandments of the Lord their God. V. 16. Left the way, left the work, which those commandments prescribed them and directed them in. Nay, lastly, they sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord. That is, they wholly addicted themselves to sin, as slaves to the service of those to whom they are sold, and, by their obstinately persisting in sin, so hardened their own hearts that at length it had become morally impossible for them to recover themselves, as one that has sold himself has put his liberty past recall. 2. In particular, though they were guilty, no doubt, of many immoralities, and violated all the commands of the second table, yet nothing is here specified, but their idolatry. This was the sin that did most easily beset them. This was, of all sins, most provoking to God. It was the spiritual adultery that broke the marriage covenant, and was the inlet of all other wickedness. Hence it is again and again mentioned here as the sin that ruined them. 1. They feared other gods. V. 7. That is, worshipped them and paid their homage to them, as if they feared their displeasure. 2. They walked in the statutes of the heathen, which were contrary to God's statutes. V. 8. Did as did the heathen. V. 11. Went after the heathen that were round about them. V. 15. So prostituting the honor of their peculiarity, and defeating God's design concerning them, which was that they should be distinguished from the heathen. Must those that were taught of God go to school to the heathen? Those that were appropriated to God take their measures from the nations that were abandoned by him? 3. They walked in the statutes of the idolatrous kings of Israel. V. 8. In all the sins of Jeroboam. V. 22. When their kings assumed a power to alter and add to the divine institutions they submitted to them, and thought the command of their kings would bear them out in disobedience to the command of their God. 4. They built themselves high places in all their cities. V. 9. If in any place there was but the tower of the watchman, a country tower that had no walls, but only a tower to shelter the watch in time of danger, or but a lodge for shepherds, it must be honored with a high place, and that with an altar. If there was a fenced city, it must be further fortified with a high place. Having forsaken God's only place, they knew no end of high places, in which every man followed his own fancy and directed his devotion to what God he pleased. Sacred things were hereby profaned and laid common, when their altars were as heaps in the furrows of the field. Hos 12:11. 5. They set them up images and groves, ashrim, even wooden images, so some think the term, which we translate groves, should be rendered, or Ashtaroth, so others, directed contrary to the second commandment. v. 10. They served idols. v. 12. The works of their own hands and creatures of their own fancy, though God had warned them particularly not to do this thing. 6. They burned incense in all the high places to the honor of strange gods, for it was to the dishonor of the true God. v. 11. 7. They followed vanity. Idols are called so because they could do neither good nor evil, but were the most insignificant things that could be. Those that worshipped them were like unto them, and so they became vain and good for nothing. v. 16. Vain in their devotions, which were brutish and ridiculous, and so became vain in their whole conversation. 8. Besides the molten images, even the 2 calves, they worshipped all the host of heaven, the sun, moon, and stars, for it is not meant of the heavenly host of angels. They could not rise so far above sensible things as to think of them. And withal, they served Baal, the deified heroes of the Gentiles. v. 16. 9. They caused their children to pass through the fire, in token of their dedicating them to their idols. 10. They used divinations and enchantments, that they might receive directions from the gods to whom they paid their devotions. 3. What means God used with them to bring them off from their idolatries, and to how little purpose. He testified against them, showed them their sins, and warned them of the fatal consequences of them by all the prophets and all the seers, for so the prophets had been formerly called, and pressed them to turn from their evil ways. v. 13. We have read of prophets, more or less, in every reign. Though they had forsaken God's family of priests, he did not leave them without a succession of prophets, who made it their business to teach them the good knowledge of the Lord, but all in vain. v. 14. They would not hear, but hardened their necks, persisted in their idolatries, and were like their fathers, that would not bow their necks to God's yoke, because they did not believe in him, did not receive his truths, nor would venture upon his promises. It seems to refer to their fathers in the wilderness. The same sin that kept them out of Canaan turned these out, and that was unbelief. 4. How God punished them for their sins. He was very angry with them. v. 18. For, in the matter of his worship, he is a jealous God, and resents nothing more deeply than giving that honor to any creature which is due to himself only. He afflicted them. v. 20. And delivered them into the hand of spoilers, in the days of the judges and of Saul, and afterwards in the days of most of their kings, to see if they would be awakened by the judgments of God to consider and amend their ways. But when all these corrections did not prevail to drive out the folly, God first rent Israel from the house of David, under which they might have been happy. As Judah was hereby weakened, so Israel was hereby corrupted, for they made a man king who drove them from following the Lord, and caused them to sin a great sin. v. 21. This was a national judgment, and the punishment of their former idolatries, and at length he removed them quite out of his sight. v. 18, 23, without giving them any hopes of a return out of their captivity. Lastly, here is a complaint against Judah in the midst of all. v. 19. Also Judah kept not the commandments of God, though they were not as yet quite so bad as Israel, yet they walked in the statutes of Israel, and this aggravated the sin of Israel, that they communicated the infection of it to Judah. See Ezek 23:11. Those that bring sin into a country or family bring a plague into it, and will have to answer for all the mischief that follows. The Samaritans' idolatry, 720 BC. 24. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, and they possessed Samaria, and dwelt in the cities thereof. 25. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there, that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. 26. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, The nations which thou hast removed, and placed in the cities of Samaria, know not the manner of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and, behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land. 27. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, Carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and let him teach them the manner of the God of the land. 28 Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear the Lord. 29 Howbeit every nation made gods of their own, and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. 30 And the men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, and the men of Cuth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima. 31 And the Avites made Nibas and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burnt their children in fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. 32s. Oh, they feared the Lord, and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. 33 They feared the Lord, and served their own gods, after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. 34 Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. 35 With whom the Lord had made a covenant, and charged them, saying, Ye shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. 36 But the Lord, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a stretched out arm, him shall ye fear, and him shall ye worship, and to him shall ye do sacrifice. 37 And the statutes, and the ordinances, and the law, and the commandment, which he wrote for you, ye shall observe to do for evermore, and ye shall not fear other gods. 38 And the covenant that I have made with you ye shall not forget, neither shall you fear other gods. 39 But the Lord your God ye shall fear, and he shall deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. 40 Howbeit they did not hearken, but they did after their former manner. 41 So these nations feared the Lord, and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day. Never was land lost, we say, for want of an heir. When the children of Israel were dispossessed and turned out of Canaan,